Imagine this. The year is 1906. You're not just traveling, you're gliding across America in velvet-lined luxury aboard a Pullman railroad car. The engine hums like a heartbeat. The world outside blurs in a streak of prairie and sky, but inside? White-gloved waiters present silver-plated courses. Crystal glasses clink. And on your linen-covered table rests a meal fit for royalty. But here's the secret. These weren't hotel dishes or restaurant favorites. These were railroad masterpieces, crafted miles from any city, deep inside the moving kitchens of America's grandest trains. Today, those recipes, they've vanished from our kitchens. Gone. Forgotten. Buried under dust and time. But not anymore. In this episode, I'm bringing you back to the golden age of train travel, where high society dined on lobster, foie gras, and truffled squab, all while crossing the Rockies. These are the 11 luxurious forgotten recipes once served aboard America's most exclusive rail lines. Trust me, you've never seen train food like this before. Stay with me till the end, because these lost dishes reveal not just what the wealthy ate, but how America once traveled, tasted, and dreamed. It may sound simple today, cream of celery soup, but aboard a Pullman dining car in the early 1900s, this dish was anything but ordinary. In fact, it was often the opening course in a 6- or 7-course meal, a refined, velvety invitation to a dining experience few Americans could ever afford. This wasn't the canned version that later flooded supermarket shelves. No, this was a la minute cooking, crafted by uniformed chefs in narrow kitchens while the train swayed gently on steel rails. Fresh celery was delicately simmered with leeks, onions, and butter until it released its subtle perfume. Then came the rich veal stock, slow-simmered for hours back at the rail yard kitchen, and finally, a swirl of heavy cream to give it that signature silken finish. But here's the twist. The celery wasn't just flavoring. It was the star. In the Gilded Age, celery was considered an exotic luxury, so much so that fine dining establishments proudly displayed it in ornate crystal vases. Pullman chefs knew this. They used it to signal refinement, that even in the middle of a vast Kansas plain, elegance was just a soup spoon away. Each bowl was served in white china, rimmed in gold, placed atop perfectly pressed linen. And when you took that first sip, creamy, herbal, faintly nutty, you weren't just on a train anymore. You were on a journey into the very heart of American opulence. Second course, and now the gloves come off. Aboard a 1900s Pullman luxury car, this dish was more than food, it was a statement. Filet Minion with Madiraa sauce wasn't just about tender beef. It was about power, class, and the performance of fine dining, served on a train slicing through the American countryside. Imagine this. The porter draws back the curtain. A silver dome is lifted with ceremony. And underneath, a perfectly seared medallion of beef tenderloin, cooked rare to medium, glistening in a deep ruby-brown glaze. The aroma? Sweet, earthy, and bold. A blend of pan-seared marrow, reduced stock, and the fortified richness of aged Madiraa wine. But here's what made it truly remarkable. This wasn't served in a hotel kitchen with room to breathe. No, it was plated inside a swaying, 6-foot-wide galley kitchen, behind the polished mahogany walls of a moving train. Timing had to be perfect. The sauce reduced just enough. The filet spoon-tender. And the presentation flawless. The Madiraa wine itself was a mark of sophistication, imported from Portugal, barrel-aged, and beloved by American elites since the 18th century. When blended into veal or beef demi-glace, it created a sauce so rich, so smooth, it practically whispered across the plate. This dish was a favorite among traveling businessmen, senators, and celebrities. It offered them a moment, however brief, to forget the noise, the travel, the work. Just them, and a bite of absolute luxury. And to this day, that exact flavor, that old-world, wood-paneled, tuxedoed elegance, remains nearly impossible to find. Unless, of course, you bring it back. Luxury had a flavor in the early 1900s, and its name was Lobster Newburg. This wasn't a meal for the everyday diner. No, this was Pullman prestige on a silver platter. Lobster Newberg in puff pastry shells was a mainstay of high-society rail travel, a culinary performance for the elite, and aboard a luxury train, it was served with flair. Imagine the scent first: butter, cognac, egg yolks, heavy cream, all swirling together with delicate chunks of sweet lobster tail. But what made it unforgettable wasn't just the richness. It was the contrast. The creamy, brandy-laced lobster mixture was gently ladled into golden, flaky puff pastry shells, freshly baked in the compact oven of a rolling kitchen. As the train rocked over the tracks, chefs balanced heat and timing like artists under pressure. The result? A buttery, crisp shell that shattered slightly with each bite, giving way to the silkiness inside. This dish had roots in Gilded Age Manhattan, first introduced at Delmonico's in the 1870s. It was bold, French-influenced, and scandalously indulgent, named after a sea captain turned Wall Street investor, Ben Wenberg. But after a falling out, the restaurant reversed the name. Wenberg became Newberg, and a legend was born. Pullman chefs adopted it not just for its taste, but for its message: this is fine living, even while in motion. Lobster Newberg was typically served as a show-stopping course between soup and roast. Often paired with a flute of chilled champagne, it turned a simple train ride into a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Today, the dish is all but forgotten. But for those few who remember, and those curious enough to taste the past, it still whispers of velvet chairs, crisp linens, and the promise of arrival. By the fourth course, the train was humming across the plains, and the dining car transformed into a stage of culinary theater. Enter breast of squab with truffle juice, a dish that didn't just serve hunger, it served status. Squab, the young, tender meat of a domesticated pigeon, was considered the caviar of poultry in early 1900s fine dining. Reserved for the wealthy, it symbolized refinement, patience, and old-world culinary tradition. And on Pullman luxury cars, it was treated with reverence. Prepared bone-in and pan-roasted in butter, the breast was seasoned simply, just salt and cracked pepper, to let its delicate, gamey flavor shine. But what elevated the dish into high art was the sauce. A black truffle juice, rich with reduced veal stock and perfumed with slivers of imported truffles from France, gave the squab an earthy depth, a reminder that luxury could be both bold and subtle. Think about this. While passengers gazed out at endless Midwestern fields or snow-covered mountain ridges, they were eating the same ingredients once served in Parisian salons or royal hunting lodges. It was Europe, bottled, boiled down, and reborn in an American railcar. Truffles, back then, were true rarities. Shaved fresh. Never synthetic. Never powdered. And when they hit the hot juice, the aroma alone could stop conversation mid-sentence. This dish was often served with glazed root vegetables and a single Duchess potato, piped like a swirl of gold beside the meat. Everything on the plate was intentional, refined, controlled. In today's world, most kitchens wouldn't dare serve squab, let alone with truffle reduction, on moving ground. But Pullman chefs did. And for a fleeting moment, somewhere between stations, America's elite dined as kings, one perfect bite at a time. As the train pulled into a quiet station for water and coal, the dining car remained still, calm, composed, refined. The fifth course was served. Poached salmon with Hollandaise and asparagus tips. It wasn't loud. It wasn't rich with spice or heavy with sauce. It was quiet luxury, the kind that whispered class without ever raising its voice. The salmon, pale pink and impossibly tender, was gently poached in a court bouillon, a fragrant broth infused with white wine, lemon, and fresh herbs. This wasn't grilling. This wasn't frying. This was technique, slow, deliberate, delicate. The goal was perfection, fish that flaked with the slightest nudge of a fork, yet held together like silk. Then came the Hollandaise, a sauce so fragile, so temperamental, it required constant whisking and the perfect touch of heat. A rich emulsion of egg yolks, lemon juice, and melted butter, it draped over the salmon like a warm golden ribbon. Beside it, a neat line of asparagus tips, trimmed and blanched until just tender, their bright green color left intact, their placement precise. They weren't garnish, they were part of the performance. This dish reflected something important. Pullman dining wasn't just about indulgence, it was about control, about elegance in restraint. You didn't need spice to impress. You needed balance, poise, confidence in the quality of your ingredients and the hand of your chef. And when served on fine bone china, with the sunlight bouncing off polished brass and white linen, even a simple piece of salmon became a moment, a pause in time, flavored by movement, memory, and the hum of steel beneath your feet. This wasn't just travel. It was grace on a plate. By the sixth course, Pullman dining crossed a line. It was no longer just service. It was spectacle. Quail stuffed with foie gras and wild rice was a dish that belonged in royal banquet halls, yet it was served in motion, aboard a train, thousands of miles from France or the Old World. Let's set the scene. A whole quail, perfectly roasted, golden, crisp skin, its tiny drumsticks crossed in a delicate pose. But the real magic was inside. Pullman chefs, trained in classical European technique, would deboine the bird carefully, then fill it with a rich stuffing, earthy wild rice, finely chopped herbs, a touch of black pepper, and nestled in the center, a slice of buttery, melt-in-your-mouth foie gras, the prized delicacy of the French elite. Once roasted, the foie gras would gently melt into the rice, infusing every bite with depth, richness, and old-world opulence. This wasn't a heavy portion. It wasn't meant to fill you, it was meant to impress you. To show that even while crossing the Great Plains, a Pullman chef could deliver Paris on a plate. Beside the bird, a drizzle of pan jus, infused with shallots and fortified wine. A spoonful of glazed carrots. Perhaps a single edible flower as garnish. A nod to beauty for beauty's sake. Foie gras was controversial even then, banned by some, revered by others. But in this moment, on this plate, it meant luxury. It meant precision. It meant you had arrived. Because when the world outside was wild and uncertain, the Pullman table was controlled, composed, a sanctuary of silk, silver, and subtle decadence. To modern ears, it might sound strange, sweetbreads? But in the golden age of rail travel, this was haute cuisine. Braised sweetbreads with mushrooms and sherry wasn't just a dish. It was a quiet test of sophistication, a way to separate the ordinary diner from the elite gourmand. Sweetbreads, the tender thymus or pancreas of veal or lamb, were prized in French cuisine for their silky texture and delicate flavor. And Pullman chefs, many trained under European masters, brought that legacy to the American rails. The process was labor-intensive. First, the sweetbreads were soaked in cold water, then gently blanched to firm the texture. Any outer membrane was carefully peeled away by hand, a task requiring patience and precision. From there, they were braised low and slow in a reduction of veal stock and dry sherry wine. The sauce thickened just enough to coat the spoon. Then came the mushrooms, wild, woodsy, and fragrant, sautéed in butter until golden, folded into the sherry just moments before plating. The result? A dish that was earthy yet elegant, subtle yet boldly rooted in culinary tradition. This was food for the refined traveler, the banker on his way to Chicago, the heiress en route to California, those who didn't just eat, but dined. Served with a slice of brioche toast or alongside Duchess potatoes, the dish arrived hot, fragrant, and faintly mysterious. Today, sweetbreads are nearly forgotten in American homes. But a century ago, they told the world you belonged to a different class, one that valued texture, technique, and time. And aboard the Pullman car, time moved slowly, just long enough to finish your wine, savor the sauce, and taste a level of refinement the world left behind. Course 8 arrived as the daylight faded and the train slipped into shadowed forest terrain. That was no accident. The chefs timed it. Because roasted saddle of venison with juniper glaze was not just a dish, it was a story, told in flavor. Venison was the meat of the hunt, the feast of aristocrats. In Europe, it belonged to kings. In America, it echoed the frontier, a reminder that even in luxury, the land still whispered its wild heart. The saddle, the loin section, was the most tender and prized cut. Roasted whole, then sliced with surgical precision, it was medium rare and deeply fragrant. The richness of the meat was balanced by a juniper glaze, dark, glossy, and aromatic with crushed berries, red wine, and a hint of wild herbs. Juniper was a deliberate choice. It connected the dish to the woods flying past the window. It added a pine-like sharpness, a wilderness note, layered into the deep, gamey flavor of the venison. This was a Pullman signature, food that mirrored the landscape, elevated to the standards of the elite. The presentation was minimal but regal, a dark pool of glaze, a fan of sliced venison, and perhaps a spoonful of chestnut puree or spiced red cabbage beside it. A single sprig of rosemary might crown the plate, not as garnish, but as intention. No talking. No theatrics. Just a moment of quiet elegance, with the soft rhythm of steel wheels beneath you and the scent of forests still fresh in the sauce. Venison was not for the faint-hearted. It was for those who understood the wild and insisted on taming it with linen, crystal, and grace. That's what Pullman dining was. A journey through landscapes, through luxury, and through time. After rich meats and velvet sauces, the ninth course came as a whisper, light, golden, and almost too beautiful to eat. Champagne gelée with sliced peaches wasn't just dessert. It was relief. A shimmering pause in the long, luxurious journey of the Pullman dining experience. The gelée, or jelly, was made not from cheap gelatin or artificial flavors, but from real champagne, gently sweetened and chilled until it set into a delicate, translucent dome. It caught the light like crystal, each quiver in the train's motion making it shimmer like a diamond on the plate. Inside or atop the gelée, fresh, hand-sliced peaches, perfectly ripe, thin and fragrant. These were often poached lightly in sugar syrup, sometimes touched with a whisper of vanilla or orange blossom water. They weren't just fruit. They were ornament, a final note of grace in an already refined melody. For the Pullman traveler, this dish sent a clear message. Luxury didn't need to be heavy. Elegance could be subtle. It could sparkle. What made this course particularly special was its seasonality. Peaches meant summer. They were rare, even precious in certain regions. Serving them signaled care, that someone in a faraway kitchen had chosen your fruit, handled it with gloves, and timed it with the season and your arrival. Often served in a delicate glass coupe or a small silver dish, the gelée would arrive cool to the touch, gently trembling as it was set before the guest. One spoonful, cold, floral, sweet, and you forgot the weight of the previous 8 courses. You remembered the movement, the hush, the feeling of traveling not just by train, but by taste. Not every Pullman meal was caviar and venison. Sometimes, luxury came softly, just after dawn, with steam on the windows and silverware clinking softly in a half-awake dining car. A French-style omelet with fines herbs was the kind of breakfast that spoke in whispers, not trumpets. It wasn't large. It wasn't flashy. But it was perfect, golden, folded like silk, and filled with the delicate touch of finely chopped fines herbs, parsley, chives, tarragon, and chervil. A classic blend from French culinary tradition, chosen not for boldness, but for subtlety. The eggs were beaten until frothy and cooked in sweet butter, never browned, never overcooked. The result was tender, almost custard-like, rolled into a gentle oval, barely kissed by heat. No cheese. No meats. Just herbs, freshness, and finesse. This dish was often paired with toasted brioche, a spoon of stewed tomatoes, and strong black coffee served in delicate china. It was the kind of breakfast that reminded you, refinement didn't sleep. Pullman's morning service was as meticulously choreographed as dinner. White-gloved waiters moved in near silence. The linens were freshly pressed. Sunlight crept through the windows, casting gold on polished mahogany. And there, on your plate, was something so simple, yet impossibly hard to master. The omelet EUX fines herbs came straight from European salons and into the hands of traveling businessmen, opera singers, authors, anyone who could afford to ride the rails in elegance. It wasn't just breakfast. It was a promise that no matter where you were going, your day began with grace. In a world rushing forward on steel tracks, this dish told you to slow down, to taste, to breathe, to start your journey like a Pullman guest should. And finally, the last course. The dining car had quieted. Outside, night had fallen. Only the rhythmic hum of the tracks remained, steady, timeless, like a heartbeat beneath the rails. Then came the finale. Vianese chocolate tort with whipped cream rosettes. Dense, dark, and decadently rich, this tort wasn't just dessert, it was celebration. A nod to Europe, to the grand cafes of Vienna, and to the belief that the last bite should linger longest. Made with deep, bittersweet chocolate, finely ground almonds, and just a touch of flour, it was baked low and slow for a smooth, almost truffle-like texture. No frosting. No decoration, except for a dusting of cocoa powder and perfect whipped cream rosettes, piped like lace around the edge. It was elegance in restraint, again. A reminder that true luxury isn't loud, it's confident. Pullman chefs chose this tort because it traveled well. It could be sliced with clean precision. It held its shape. And more importantly, it made the guest feel remembered, even after 10 courses. It was the exclamation point at the end of an edible poem. And as the last plate was cleared, the diners leaned back in their velvet chairs, full, not just with food, but with memory. Because these weren't just meals. They were moments, served in motion, lost to time, until now. If you felt even a glimpse of that lost elegance, of that forgotten world of white gloves, crystal light, and moving feasts, then join me. Subscribe for more stories that don't just feed curiosity, but bring history back to the table.